that means? Ashe means I agree. Let it be so. So as I do this presentation, which is called African Origins on Tour, I want you to know that we'll be sharing some different information, but so that I know that you're with me, I may ask you to say Ashe, because it not only means let it be so or I agree, it also represents the spirit that is in this place, that is around us, and that is within us. I travel around the country and around the world doing this presentation to awaken the hearts and the minds and the spirits of young people. And believe me, for most of you, this is unlike anything that you ever will have seen before. And so as we go to the next slide, I want to first begin by giving honor and praise to the Most High, who is known by many names and worshipped in many ways. Certainly the one source and the one force through which we all live, move, and have our being. But we also give honor to our ancestors, for there's an African proverb which says, if we stand tall, it is because we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors. Or as Dr. Jacob Carruthers has said, indeed our stride is wide because we're walking in the footsteps of giants. Ashe? Ashe. Going a little bit further here, we see some of the recent African American ancestors, such as George Washington Carver, Booker T. Washington, Mary McLeod Bethune, Frederick Douglass, Ida B. Wells, Marcus Garvey, Kwame Ture, Sojourner Truth, A. Philip Randolph, Singmei Pia, also known as Joseph Cinquay, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and Benjamin Mays, whose poem, The Clock of Destiny, I recited to you at the beginning. As we go a little bit further, I'm going to ask you to view this presentation, not just with your two physical eyes, but with what our ancestors call the third eye, the eye of all-seeing enlightenment, the eye that allows you to see deep into the mental and spiritual realms. For as the great poet Lister Bell Middleton has said, sharpen your eye and tune your ear, so you'll know what you see and understand what you hear. We all know and have been told before that a picture is worth what? One more time, a picture's worth what? 1,000 words. And that's why I very rarely lecture without my pictures. Because there might be something that you disagree with me about, but when I show you the picture, there will be no question in your mind when I'm finished. We want to begin with Africa, which is the motherland, the birthplace of all humanity. As a matter of fact, all life on planet Earth began in Africa. And at the beginning of time, all life began in the Nile Valley region. And at that time, our ancestors called that region, or the river, not the Nile, but they called it Hapi. Everybody say Hapi. Now they call it the Hapi River because one of the things, that's where you get the word happy from. Because the river and its resources provided everything that they needed to live a happy life and to have an abundant existence. As we go a little bit further to the next slide here, what you'll see is that the names of the places in ancient times tell the whole story. As we look here, the original name of Africa was Alkebulan. Everybody say Alkebulan. So I'm going to be sharing some original names with you and asking you to repeat them so that you can get used to saying them. Alkebulan means land of the spirit people. And it means land of the spirit people because everything that we did was spiritually centered, culturally conscious, and spirit-based. But remember, I told you the names make the difference. The original name for what today is Sudan was called Nubia. Everybody say Nubia. Nubia. The original name for what today is called Ethiopia was Kush. Everybody say Kush. And the original name for what we today call Egypt was called Kemet. Everybody say Kemet. Now I'm going to show you why this is important on the next slide, because again, the names tell the whole story. Look at what the word Kemet means. What does it mean? Land of the Blacks. Land of the Blacks. That's going to be very important a little bit further in my presentation, because there are some people who have tried to steal your culture, and they've tried to claim your accomplishments for themselves. And what I'm going to show you is that we, as African people, were operating at a higher level of technology in ancient times than we are today. Y'all didn't catch that. See, y'all think with all of our computers and with our PowerPoint and with our stereos and our MP3 players and our satellites and all those types of things, you think that the technology today has far exceeded any other point in time. But by the time I'm finished with you, I'm going to show you not only were our ancestors the ones that gave the gift of technology to humanity, that we were the ones who had mastered it. Ashe? Okay, as we go to the next slide, here we see the African origins of writing. This particular hieroglyph goes back well over 4,000 years, but we were writing long before this hieroglyph. As we go a little bit further to the next slide, you'll see that it started with the development of papyrus. Everybody say papyrus. Papyrus. Now papyrus is where you get your modern day word for paper, because our ancestors gave the gift of writing to humanity. And let's see how they were able to do it. They went down by the banks of the river Hapi, which is what river? The Nile River. And they cut down these long, tall reeds called papyrus reeds. And they cut them into thin strips. And then they would find a nice flat stone. And they would lay the strips horizontally and vertically. And then they would take a mallet-like instrument and pound it to make it nice and what? Nice and flat and nice and smooth. And then they would set it out in the sun so that it would what? So that it would dry. So in the next slide here, what you see is the world's first piece of paper, called what? Papyrus. And this is an actual piece of papyrus that I scanned on my computer. So every time you pick up a book, a notebook, a magazine, a book of scriptures, anything that has pages in it or paper, you should think of the gift of writing that our ancestors gave to the universe and to the humanity. But not only that, whenever we take tests that we think we're having problems with, like the writing assessment and so forth, we need to understand that our ancestors gave that gift to the world. There's no reason why we can't master it too. On the next slide, what you're going to see here is scribes, which are writers, with their master teacher overlooking their work. This particular hieroglyph can be found in Saqqara and again goes back over 4,000 years. You see, our ancestors documented everything that they did. Going to the next slide.
Now here is what we call the Papyrus of Ani. Here you see the Medu Neter, the sacred writings, you see the pictograph. There's a lot going on in this picture. But what's going on here is actually the first concept of a judgment upon completion of this life. No matter what spiritual system that you study, almost all spiritual systems deal with the fact that at the end of this life, there will be some sort of accounting for what we've done in this life, and that's what this papyrus represents. So what's going on here is that here you have the scribe Ani being ushered into the hall of judgment by Anpu, who was also called by the Greeks Anubis. And he's being ushered into the hall of judgment upon being deceased. Here we also have Anpu setting the scales of judgment. When you walk in and you see just outside of or just inside of most courtrooms, you'll see these scales, and you'll see a statue of a woman who is blindfolded holding these scales, representing the idea that justice is blind. This is where they got that concept from. Here you have a beast that is a devourer, okay? And what happens here is symbolically, upon being deceased and dying in this life, the person's heart is placed on this side of the scales, represented by this small vessel, and the feather, representing truth, justice, and righteousness, is placed on this side of the scales. And it was understood that if your heart was not weighed down with wrong thoughts and wrong actions and wrong words, that your heart would be as light as a feather, and you would be able to balance the scale, and go into an afterlife of peace and paradise. But if your heart was burdened down with wrong thought and wrong action and wrong deeds and so forth, then your heart would be consumed by the devourer. And so one of the things that we had to do was to be able to balance the scales by living a righteous life. Here is the scribe Tahuti, who in the ancient writing says the lips of wisdom are sealed except for the ears of understanding, except to the ears of understanding. He is writing down the name of the deceased in the book of life. And we find several references of the book of life in the book of Revelations of the Bible. And so all of these things go back to our ancestors.
Ptahhotep has written the oldest complete text in the world. The oldest complete book in the world was written by this man, Ptahhotep. Hit it one more time, please. And you see a picture of when he's younger. This is a picture of when he's a little bit older. I was blessed. I'm just getting back from Egypt and just getting back from the jet lag of that. This time last week I was in Egypt going to the ancient tombs and going to the pyramids in these different places because I do hands-on field research to go back and show my people where they came from and what we're capable of.